I'm riding every roller coaster at the world's most immersive theme park, Phantasialand. From a crazy launch coaster to the world's best flying coaster, spinning coasters, one of the most intense coasters in the world, some crazy water rides, and so much more, starting with the park's most iconic ride, Terran. This is known as one of the world's best roller coasters. It starts with an intense launch, throwing us forwards into a huge turn that wraps around the rocks and drops to the ground, only to immediately climb back up and fly over a big hill that lifted me from my seat before diving into a tunnel. We burst out of it and instantly snapped to the side, tossing me sideways as the train whipped through a turn. We spiraled around the station, turned the other way, then shot through a house, snapping to the side and falling under a bridge, only to rise up, go under another bridge, over the brakes, past the line, and into a little side area. We twisted one way, then the other, then got yanked back the opposite direction as we spiraled under these massive rocks, and finally leveled off to hit the second launch, which is one of the best launches I've ever experienced. I got shoved into the back of the seat as the train picked up a ton of speed, going faster and faster. Then we shot up and past a waterfall, hugging the rocks as we climbed and twisted around them. We swerved our way to the ground, then blasted past a path and narrowly avoided some rocks before we rose up and whipped to the other side, ejecting me from my seat, then pushing me back down as we ripped through a tunnel, bursting out and twisting over the station. We turned the other way, then we rose up and over the same waterfall we blasted past after the launch, dropping down a little hill and unfortunately hitting the brakes. But the ride wasn't over yet as we dove under the path and forcefully twisted to the side, taking us into the final breaks.
That was amazing, dude. The way that thing just twists and weaves its way around the land, I've never seen anything like it. It also just never ended too. Like halfway through, I was like, okay, for sure we're getting to the end. And then we just hit another stinking insane launch and just got thrown into what could be a second coaster.
After that, I went over to the land's other coaster, Reich, which is a family boomerang, going through the layout forwards and then doing it all backwards.
This has recently become an extremely popular type of coaster, but I've never actually been able to ride one before, so I'm very interested to see what it's like.
It starts with a lift, pulling us backwards out of the station and into a little nook in the land. We suddenly stopped, then sat there for a little before dropping and shooting through the station. We rose up and over a little hill, making me feel kind of weightless, then twisted down and into a trench. We turned the other way, then rose up and over a little hill, quickly leveling off and going back into the nook, climbing up a little spike and falling backwards. We fell down that drop into the trench, which, due to being backwards, was really fun, then made our way back through the trench, rising up and over the helix so slowly that I thought we might not make it. Fortunately, we did and dropped back into the station, slowing down a little, then coming to a stop, ending the ride.
That was fantastic. I can totally see why those are as popular as they are. I do wish it was like a tiny bit longer, but all around as a family coaster, that was incredible.
After that, I went over to something that I'd wanted to check out all day, Mystery Castle, which is this huge tower that stands over the entire surrounding area.
So even though I don't think this is a coaster, I have to ride it. I ended up getting an Airbnb that's within walking distance of the park, and the entire walk over, I could just see this giant tower looming over everything. Like I was walking through a big old field and I'd turn to the left and I'd see this just monolith of a tower, and I have to know what it is.
The line for this ride was really cool, having me walk up and over a bridge to the tower, which felt like I was heading to a boss fight in a video game. Then inside the castle, everything was dark and creepy as I made my way into the basement and into a secret lab where I saw this animatronic being creepy. Then I was led into the ride where I saw that it was a massive drop tower. After climbing into the seats, we sat there for a second, then launched up in a launch that started okay but kicked into second gear as we just kept descending, quickly leveling off and throwing me from my seat. We stopped at the top with this huge electric thing going off above us. Then, out of nowhere, we dropped. We fell for ages before bouncing back up and falling back down. We kept bouncing up and down in the dark, then landed back on the ground, ending the ride.
That was amazing. That was amazing. That caught me so off guard. Like when I saw that it was a drop tower, I was thinking like, oh, okay, it's gonna be a normal drop tower. It's gonna lift me up and it's gonna drop me. It's probably gonna be in the dark. So when we stinking launched up, I was just completely blindsided, and that just carried over for everything else. Like I was still struggling to keep up with the launch when we started dropping, and then we started bouncing. It was just, that was amazing.
After I got off that, I started going over to the next coaster, but something caught my eye. The park's Rapids ride looked insane, and seeing as just the day before I'd ridden 2 amazing water rides, I decided to check it out. It starts very chill with us just floating past the path. Then we went into a cave and started climbing up what felt like a lift, but leveled off super quickly and put us onto a conveyor belt, which took us to something I didn't even realize was possible for this type of ride, an elevator. elevator. We were pulled up to the top and right next to a drop, which was insane, with us colliding into the side of the trough on the way down and making a huge wave in the process. I should note there's no seatbelt or anything on this ride, so everything was like 10 times scarier. We started floating through a whirlpool, going past some really cool theming through a section that was actually fairly chill until it wasn't, as we started sliding down a drop that suddenly got steeper and lifted me out of my seat. Then we hit the water, nearly submerging the car with a huge wave. It just kept going from there too, as we started spinning and made our way over to another drop, which from off-ride looks steep enough to flip the boat, but on-ride it felt like a downgrade from the previous two. Then we went past some more really cool theming and the ride was over.
That might be the craziest water ride I've ever ridden, and I don't think I'm exaggerating in saying that. Oh my god. Like, I've mentioned in the past how I really like my water rides to be panic-inducing, and normally that panic, actually on every other water ride I've ever ridden, that panic comes from, oh no, I'm gonna get wet, how do I avoid getting wet? That's the only water ride that's been panic-inducing purely due to the insanity of it. I got air on those drops. I was floating out of my seat on those drops. There were no restraints. I could have stood up and gotten thrown.
After that, I went over into the park's China area. The theming in this land was incredible, but the two rides in it were okay at best. There was a madhouse ride with a pre-show that was just stinking never ending, and a fun and super trippy ride experience. There was also an Omnimover ride, which the less said about it, the better. It wasn't bad per se, but it was super outdated and confusing and kind of run down feeling. Anyways, after I left the China area, I was into the Mexico area, which is where the park's mine train is. Now, because this is a mine train, I didn't think anything of it and assumed that it would just be a filler ride. It wasn't. It starts with a fairly fast lift hill pulling us up and over this hill, and I thought we were gonna drop down and twist around this area, but instead we dropped down and immediately rose up into a shed, only to fall down a much longer drop and twist to the side, shooting through a tunnel and bursting out into a huge layout. We dove down, twisted past the path, then entered back into the mountain, falling down a little drop that threw me from my seat and rocketing to the side through a legitimately great turn. Then we left the mountain and started to climb up a second lift. We curved to the side and down a wonky drop, still turning to the side as we rose up over the path, then dove into another tunnel down another wild hill, ejecting me from my seat. I don't entirely know what happened in this dark area, but it was crazy. And I know it might sound like I'm joking because this was just a mine train, but I'm not. This indoor area legitimately rivals thrill coasters I've ridden for intensity. We burst out of the mountain, down a little drop, and over to a third lift. At the top, we dropped down a little drop, rose up and twisted to the side down a surprisingly wild drop, then smashed through a turn, pinning me to my seat as we spun around through an extremely long helix. We hopped up and into another tunnel, quickly shooting out and over the path, and now finally we twisted through the bit I saw online, falling down a hill that threw me into the air, then turning around above a waterfall before finally hitting the brakes.
Oh my god, that was crazy. I thought that was just gonna be a normal mine train. I thought we were gonna go up this lift behind me, turn around, drop down, twist around the water, and bada bing bada boom, that was the ride. I was not expecting it to go and go and go. What was that, 3 lift hills? Oh my god, it never ended.
After that, I went over to go into the park's Africa section, but the walkway was blocked off for some reason, so I had to take a different route, and I'm so glad I did, because it took me to one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in a theme park. I was walking through a canyon, and then I took a turn, went down some stairs, and all of a sudden, I was crossing a bridge with a huge ravine under me, and of course, because this park is amazing, underneath this bridge isn't just a waterfall, it's the world's steepest log flume, Chiapas, which recently won the golden ticket for the best water ride in the world, so I had to check it out. It starts by climbing up a little lift underneath the mine train, then we slid into some water and floated into a cave, going past a dig site and some cool ruins before falling down a drop, smashing into the water and creating a huge and drenching wave. We floated into another tunnel and slammed to a stop in front of a statue, then quickly rotated to the side and kind of launched backwards, going through a little tunnel and through some more amazing ruins. We floated for quite a while and found our way into a party tunnel with lights going crazy all around us, and even this guy playing the drums on some skulls while some lasers went crazy. Suddenly, we fell down a backwards drop that caught me completely off guard and showered me with water, then backed our way into another cave. The track quickly snapped to the side and launched us towards another lift, and I gotta mention just how well this section is hidden. You can see the backwards drop and the lift, but the rocks are perfectly positioned, so it's impossible to see the track sliding to the side, keeping this as a complete surprise. When we made it to the top of the lift, I was expecting us to fall down the big drop, but instead we floated through even more cave past some statues that looked like they were gonna spray us, only to stop at the last second and up yet another lift. And finally, after a bit of floating, it was time for the big drop. I was levitated from my seat as we started dropping, and held there as the drop kept getting steeper and steeper, flying under the bridge and leveling off, only to rise up over a hill, tossing me into the air before we slammed into the water, creating a massive wave and drenching everyone. Finally, we floated back into the station, ending the ride.
What was that, dude? That did stuff that I did not know log flumes could do. We went backwards. There was a backwards drop.
After that, it was finally time to enter into the Africa land, but on the way, I got sidetracked again and checked out Talakon. This is one of the craziest rides I've ever ridden. Every single flip is incredibly forceful, and once this thing starts going, it does not stop. It was actually a bit much near the end, not so much that I felt sick, but enough that I didn't need to ride it again. I would actually say that this ride was more fun to watch off-ride than it was to ride, especially with all of the fire effects around the ride. Now, after that, I actually finally went into the Africa land, for real this time, and checked out the most intense ride in the park, apart from maybe Talakon, Black Mamba. It starts with a little drop out of a tower, then we snap to the side and plunge to the ground, only to rise up and rip through an extremely forceful loop, holding me into the seat as we flipped over a path. We shot out of the loop and under another path, then rose up and snapped through a roll, whipping me to the side, then dropping down, only to rise up next to a waterfall, pulling all the blood to my legs as we flew up and dove through a tunnel. Out of nowhere, we snapped through a corkscrew, then turned around behind the loop into another tunnel that suddenly turned into a corkscrew, flipping me upside down, then continuing to turn right up next to the ground. We rose up, then dipped down again, and snapped into a turn, pinning me into my seat with a ton of force as we stuck to the ground, then rose up and popped over the corkscrew, smashed through a building, and entered into another extremely intense helix. We twisted the other way, then hit the brakes, which here, for some reason, are in the pitch black.
That was crazy. Like, I don't know how fast we were actually going, but the way we stayed right up against the ground made it feel like we were going like 100 miles an hour. It was also just stupidly intense. Like, that's one of the most non-stop intense coasters I've ever ridden.
Also in this land, I gotta give a shout out to the Challenge Trail. This is a full-fledged and somewhat difficult obstacle course that's intertwined with Black Mamba. It's included in park admission and genuinely so much fun. After I got out of that, I went over through the park's Main Street land and over to the huge kiddie area for what I feel is the only really bad ride in the park, Crazy Bats. I can't really talk about this ride for very long because there's literally no footage for me to use because this coaster uses VR, and that makes this one of the most abominable experiences I've ever had. The VR and the coaster were off sync a little bit for me, which made this thing so ungodly nauseating that I actually had to go and sit down for 15 minutes afterwards. Putting VR on coasters is the stupidest thing of all time, and while I do like the characters this ride has, they really need to take the VR away. It is terrible. After I was back to my bearings, I went into the park's huge indoor family area, which is home to two spinning coasters, Winge's Fear and Force, which are located in a dark corner of the land. These rides do have a few surprises to them. I'm only gonna spoil the Fear side here, but if you want to go in completely spoiler-free, feel free to just skip ahead in the video. I started with the Fear side, which starts with an elevator lift that lifted us up at an angle and aligned us with a drop, shooting us to the ground. We rose up and over a big hill, then dropped again before rising up and starting to spin. We worked our way through a few turns that are designed to get the car spinning. Then we started twisting down a massive helix that's in the center of the land, picking up some speed and going back into the darkness. We went over a big turn, then shot out of a frog's mouth, went straight into the main surprise, slamming to a stop. Then the track seesawed to the other side and let us go as we twisted through more turns in the pitch black. There is one final surprise, but it's really quick and happens in the dark, so I'm not gonna spoil it here. I did also go on the Force side too. It's a fairly different layout, but it's also kind of the same in what it does, going essentially through the same motions of the Fear side, just in a slightly different way. One of the surprises is a bit different on this side, but I'm not gonna spoil what that is. Though what I will say is of the two sides, the surprise on this side was definitely more fun.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of blown away by that. Like, I knew going in that there was gonna be some sort of trick to it, but that did stuff I've actually never seen on a coaster before. Like, I've ridden coasters that go up with an elevator, but I've never ridden one that goes up with an elevator and then halfway through tilts you and drops you off that tilt.
After that, I left the indoor area and went back to the Main Street land because it was finally time to enter the park's newest and arguably best land, Rookburg, a huge, unbelievably detailed steampunk city that's dominated by F.L.Y, the world's only launched flying coaster.
I am so indescribably excited for this ride. Like, this is the ride that put this park on the map for me. I didn't know about this park. This thing opened, and all of a sudden now it's my #1 bucket list park. This is one of the most universally praised rides in the world. There is also literally nothing else on Earth even close to this. This is the only launched flying coaster in the world. I'm so excited to get to ride it. So let's go and ride it.
It starts with an incredible line, taking me on a full elevated tour of the land and giving me some amazing angles of the coaster. I could see this being a bit tedious to go through for rewriting, but it's so well done that I didn't even mind it. Eventually, I made it into this room where I had to put everything I owned into a free locker. Then it was time to start the ride. Now, normally on this type of ride, it takes a long time to load because you got to get into the train, which then slowly slides down and into the flying position. Here, though, you start the ride in a seated position. Oh, and big shout out to RidesXL for the POV, by the way. We stayed sitting as we went through a tunnel past a huge steampunk city, then we smoothly flipped into the flying position as we pulled up to the launch, and then we launched, which wasn't super forceful, but it felt really cool in the flying position. We built up more and more speed, then we lifted off and flew over a big turn next to some buildings, dropping down and flipping through a super floaty roll above a building. We smoothly dropped down and turned, then rose up into one of the best moments on any flying coaster in the world. As we popped up over the launch, I was lifted from my seat, freely floating in the air, and for just 1 second, I was actually flying. Then we twisted to the side over some shops, and the path fell down a tiny drop and rose up, smoothly diving to the ground as we changed directions and twisted the other way, shooting through some buildings and going right next to the path over a valve that started spraying steam at us. We quickly flew over the path, twisted the other way, then quickly rolled to the other side in a surprisingly intense turn past the line, dropping underground and hitting a second launch, making us go a bit faster, then continuing to launch as we rose up, making it really feel like we had a jetpack strapped to our back. We quickly leveled off, which really threw me out of my seat in the front, then twisted to the ground, wrapping around a huge building, which is actually a hotel. I didn't stay here because it was way out of my budget, but this has got to be the craziest theme park hotel in the world, right? We turned past the hotel, then smoothly started turning the other way over the path in another surprisingly intense turn, pulling me forwards in a way that was forceful without being uncomfortable. We dipped under the launch, then popped over another hill that levitated me in the air for a second before snapping to the side, going past some buildings, and bursting out from a little tunnel over the path, again floating me in the air, then quickly twisting to the side and spiraling around the line. Suddenly, we dropped into a trench and shot up into a barrel roll, making me feel weightless as we spun around and through a trench, rising up and twisting over some water, then dropping down, ending the ride. Now, I might be overthinking this, but as I sat here recording this video, I kind of realized that this ride has a story that's being told purely by the ride's layout. The main story of this ride that we're told throughout the line is that we're testing out an experimental flying machine, and I think this layout is us learning how to fly. It starts super slow and graceful with these big swooping turns super high above the ground. Flying is completely new to us, so we're being super careful not to crash, but then we start building up confidence, with the second launch being a big turning point, as we've gained enough confidence to finally start taking more risks, which is why the second half is so much crazier than the first half. I think it's a really cool bit of subtle storytelling that's either completely unintentional and I've lost my mind, or something that I've just never seen many people talk about.
That is incredible. There's no competition. That is easily the best flying coaster I've ever ridden, because that actually gets close to what I imagine it would feel like to fly. Like, normally on flying coasters, they are like miles above the ground, and I at least for me, there's no way that's how I would fly if I could actually fly. This feels a lot more like it. You're just twisting around through a town, going over, under, through everything. It's crazy. Also, they 100% set my restraints wrong. I can tell that you're supposed to be tossed in the air a bunch, but for me, I had so much room. That made it all the crazier when we'd pop over a hill and I would get thrown into the air.
By the way, this is video 9 of an 11 video long European theme park series, and across every park I visit, I'm putting together an overall top 5. After my last video, the list looked like this, but Phantasialand definitely adds some rides, with F.L.Y and Terran taking the number 3 and 4 spots respectively. And while I have definitely ridden better coasters, overall, this is my new new favorite theme park. The level of theming that this park features is second to none. Even compared to new billion-dollar parks like Epic Universe, it still doesn't get even close to the level of immersion that this park has. The way that every single land stays self-contained is masterful. Apart from a very few instances, it's nearly impossible to see out of a given land. This park literally has a 200-foot tall drop tower that you can see from the entire surrounding area and town, and yet you would be hard-pressed to see this thing from anywhere in the park except for the land that it's in. And this park is tiny. It's nearly half the size of Hollywood Studios, but somehow it feels like a larger park than that park. Not only because it just generally has more things to do, but because of how every single land uses its verticality. Everywhere in this park has a third dimension that most theme park lands just don't use. Something is always either above you or beneath you, sometimes both. It's incredible. It is easily, without the shadowest of a doubt, the best theme park I've ever been to. And if you're in Europe or plan to go to Europe and don't plan to go to this park, I implore you to check it out. Anyways though, in my next video, I'm going to Europa Park, another of the highest rated parks in Europe. So subscribe to see that, and if you enjoyed this video, then you should consider checking out this one from Movie Park Germany.